Welcome to Season 4 of the Vulnerable Power Show, a deep dive into the heart and soul of leadership, where we spotlight visionary leaders, spiritual entrepreneurs, innovative executives, and New Earth pioneers who have all done the inner work and soul searching to transform and step into their greater calling and mission, here to make a big impact for collective good. We will share and explore vulnerable insights and potent wisdom in our heart-centered dialogues, so you too can be equipped for the future paradigm unfolding today. Be empowered with the skills, tools, and practices so you too can do the transformative work and be the ascending leader you came here to be. Together, let's bring more heart and soul back to leadership around the world. Greetings, everybody. Greetings and welcome. Welcome back to Season 4 of the Vulnerable Power Show. And we are well underway this season with more heart and soul coming your way to leadership, wherever you are in your leadership journey. It's our intention through this show to show you all the ins and outs of the messy parts of the journey, the healing, the transformation, so you too can step into the leader you came here to be. Today, I have a real treat. A regular on the show, Manya Welch, who's also on this season, a co-creative partner and let's say a woo-woo leader in her own right, was on my guest show, God knows how many years ago, and talk about the topic we're going to talk about today, this notion of following our extrasensory gifts. What does it mean to use your extrasensory gifts or to channel or things like that? And this person, Manya Welch, literally is a shining example of embodying this extrasensory wisdom, because she said to me about a year and a half ago while I was preparing for this season we're now underway with, and she said, there's a guy, Jeffrey Eisen, you and him both teach on Insight Timer. We're all on Insight Timer as teachers. And she's like, I don't know what it is. There's something. It's an intuitive sense that I have. Reach out to the guy. And so I followed her hunch. There's different names for this stuff. And before I knew it, Jeffrey and I were chatting. Jeffrey is, like I said, a fellow teacher, a spiritual life coach, a channeler, an energy intuitive. I'm really excited today with most of my guests, really blessed to share the space because him and I share a really interesting trajectory coming from corporate and unpacking and shifting into a spiritual, mission-driven lifestyle and leadership. I really was like blown away and said, come on the show, Jeffrey, let's co-create this. So without further ado, Jeffrey, thank you for being here. And thank you for not only being here, being who you are in this day and age.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Austin. And, our chats, obviously, Manya had the right idea, because there was an instant bond when we started to talk, and a camaraderie, but also a joviality. Like, I don't know if it's going to come out today. I don't know, but we can have a little bit of fun together, and we'll try to behave. I know, but and that's. It's kind of nice to meet someone who not only allows but encourages you to be your authentic self, and I think we kind of do that for each other, which is really kind of neat. And so thank you for your friendship. Thank you for connecting and following Manya's hunch, and thank you for having me on your show.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's a mutual resonance, Jeffrey. And I love how you said that, joviality, because I was reminded of another guest who was on the first season. Richard Bellars once said to me, this work is sacred. It's not serious. And so many people in the spiritual scene, I feel like, either go one direction or the other, and there isn't a good synergy or harmonization of both seriousness and play. So I appreciate that you highlighted that. And I know you behave. Let's see if I can behave.
Well, yeah. It's interesting to say that, because every once in a while I reflect that I take my journey a little bit too seriously. So the entity that I channel, Shaltazar, often adds a little humor into things to make me realize that this doesn't have to be that serious. It can also be fun. So I'm looking forward to having some fun, my good friend.
I love it. I love it. Well, it's interesting because you say that we're going to unpack a lot of this today, the being that flows through you, so to speak, or you called it the entity, because it reminds me of, the person I would say is really big in the world in this scene in terms of Esther Hicks and Abraham. And even Abraham, I'm sure you know her as well, has this humor that comes through. So even these, let's say, otherworldly beings, these hidden dimensions, or as you call it, the unseen world, even those beings, these higher dimensional beings are humorous and they're playful. So it really lends itself to what you're talking about. So let's go to something that's not so funny.
Okay.
Or corporate backgrounds, because you grew up in a family business, right? So I wanted to, if it resonates, to start there, your background and experience, to give us a juxtaposition, because the first 2 or 3 seasons of this show, we brought so many leaders to talk about their dark night journey and their before and after. So we don't want to go too much into it to highlight it, because I think it's, like I said at the intro, it's mirrors mine. And it really, when I heard family business, steel, Canada, you got to talk about this on the show. So yeah, let's start there. What feels resonant in terms of who were you before you stepped into this soul's calling, into this mission, into the type of work you do now?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I really believe that I had a do-over, and it's kind of interesting because it happened just around 50. Now, I doubt if I will last till 100, but that's okay, because I'm 71 now, and the last 20 years has been so much better and so much more packed than the first 50.
I love
And
that.
so, but although I am still healing from those first 50 years, they are the greatest teacher to me. And I know that that's what this do-over in this second part of my life is all about, is to find the greater meaning, and to find the balance between the corporate business world. And it's kind of interesting, because for the longest time, I resisted calling what I do a business. I'm a spiritual life coach, the Chandler of Shaltazar. I'm an energy intuitive, and obviously, I have offerings that people pay for. And even this morning, I was talking to my team, and they said we brought someone new on the team, and I was asked to talk about my business vision, my business philosophy, and I could just feel the tension in my body. Don't use that word. That's like swearing. So I'm still healing from that those first 50 years, and I believe that that's part of the journey. I will not tell you I have figured it all out. I will not tell you that I have been able to use my spirituality as fully successfully as I want in the world of business, but I'm figuring that out. I'm figuring it out. I will definitely take the do-over part of my life over the first part, because the first part was playing the game, playing the businessman, playing the CEO. And one of the big aha moments for me when I began my journey of self-discovery after being 30 years in the family business was that I care more about people than profits. And that one is, now, having said that, I still have to balance, right? You got to pay the bills, right? I got all kinds of things that I want to do and bring to the world. And so how can I care about people and also attract profits? And so that is the dance, that is the balancing act that I am working on. And I think that's important. But I was extremely typical a business person for the 30 years I was in business. As a matter of fact, if you would have asked me, in my 30s or 40s, when are you going to retire? I would say, oh no, I'm going to stay in business. This is because I allowed it to define me. I allowed it to be who I was, instead of finding who I truly am, which I have and am continuing to do so on a daily basis, and letting that define my reality, as opposed to fitting into this box called businessman, right?
I love that. So much good stuff already, because you're also touching on one of the tenets of a lot of movements that have spurred the last 20, 30 years. I would say maybe more 20 years, conscious capitalism to name one, people over profits. And you brought something up that I didn't expect us to bring out, which, the nature and the format is the guests who maybe new don't know, some of the regulars know, it's we flow. We have a general gist of what we're going to talk about. So I didn't expect us to come out in terms of the resistance of bringing together a spiritual business. And let's unpack that in a moment. For now, I want you to break down, if you can. You talked about the H word, something that in business, there's a lot of resistance around the healing you had to do from the first 50 years. And I love how you called it a do-over, because I had to grieve a lot after my sabbatical, coming out of full-time corporate law myself. And even if I was slightly woo-woo and integrative and a holistic lawyer still, the do-over concept and the healing, what did that look like for you in terms of, and I understand this definition of you played the game, you checked the box. We've covered that a lot on this show. What did the healing for you look like in terms of the conditioning and some of the stuff you had to unpack, or as you called it, unlearn when we first spoke?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because if you don't mind, I'll just sort of reveal that how the turning point began.
Yeah,
and,
please.
and a lot of people say, was it instantaneous? Did you have an instantaneous awakening? And as I look back, that wasn't the case. The company had grown. We were a mid-sized family business, and it had grown substantially. We had a number of employees. And I hired a human resources contractor, a consultant, because we wanted to bring in culture. We wanted to bring in training. It was to that time, right? We had to move from the mom and pop patriarchal kind of business. We were had sales in the millions, and so we had to grow up. Now, I'll just add to that. What was really interesting is I dropped out of university after second year. I had no business experience. I had no formal education. Didn't realize it till I went on my journey of self-discovery that the reason I went into the family business is so that my late father would love, recognize, and appreciate me. And that was, I didn't realize it, but that was the motivation. That was the drive. If you succeed, it seemed that the only thing Dad really cared about was business. So if you get into business, you can be his buddy and he can recognize you and appreciate you. I spent 30 years in the business and never did get that. But as I embarked on my journey of self-discovery, realized that he was looking for the same thing I was. So there's no way he could give it to me. The human resources consultant comes in, starts doing training. I start reading leadership books. Those principles you talked about, conscious leadership, balanced scorecard. Didn't have a clue that was the nudging from the universe as to what would come. So it's like I knew business, but the books I was reading were all on that leadership aspect of it, which is kind of interesting. And so I started to read those books, and I started to pay attention to the training. And the actual turning point was we went on vacation, and the human resources consultant, his name was Dave Fisher, gave me a book, and it was Robin Sharma's The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Wait, what?
Which is
really?
Yes.
Okay, keep
Robin
going.
Sharma's.
So that was your turn. Wow. Okay, that's kismet.
That was
keep
my
going.
turning point. We went to Florida, and I read the book, and it was amazing because Robin too was a lawyer who converted, and it wasn't that spiritual, but there was a spiritual undertone to it. And there we were in Florida. I went to the bookstore and bought 2 or 3 more of Robin's books and just ate them up and really loved them. Came back from vacation, looked up his website, saw he was doing a workshop in Toronto. We were living in Ottawa at the time, and registered myself, my wife, a couple of my kids, the vice president of our sales and marketing. Now, in those days, it was a kind of a little bit more spiritual than Robin is today. Robin is very much more motivational. And in the back of one of his books, I read about the Master Series, where he took on executives. And I set the intention, I want to be, one of those people. I met with him at a break, and he told me how much a year cost with him. And it's like, no, well, thanks, Robin. He said, but I'll make an exception. I'll work with you for 3 months for this much. Okay. And it was a mid 5-figure number, which was an investment. And I don't know what got into me, but it's like, yes. Today, I don't know if I'd spend that much money on myself at all, but I did it, and I worked with Robin for 3 months. And some of the practices that he taught me, journaling being one of them, early awakening, meditating, they stuck with me. As a matter of fact, that journaling practice was the beginning of me connecting with Sheltazar and the unseen world. And from there, I went on to other coaches. In the beginning, for the first few years, reading 50, 60 books a year, going to workshops, you name it. I was like a Hay House junkie, going to all of their events. And interestingly enough, it sort of evolved a little bit more into spirituality. Now, let's go back to business. At the same time, didn't want to give up the business, thought that I was afraid to do that, and was trying to navigate both of these worlds, whereas one side was taking me certainly much more to the personal development, the personal evolution, the personal transformation, while still trying to be in the business, got someone else to run it. Long story short, a lot of probably poor business decisions, because I wanted to hold on to it out of fear, and the universe had something else in mind for me. And so after some downward spiraling of our financial situation, we decided I would sell the business, and that was it.
Wow.
And so from there, I just kept evolving and evolving. I knew I wanted to be a coach. Once again, as I mentioned before, how do I run this coaching practice? Because I don't want it to be a business. The interesting part was a little bit of the detour into spirituality, and little did I know then that it would be such a major part. And being brought up in one of the formal religions, being brought up Jewish, I tried to reconcile. I even met with a rabbi a number of times and tried to reconcile my newfound spiritual beliefs
with the Abrahamic covenants.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, it didn't work. It didn't. I'll never forget the day that I asked the rabbi, help me understand one of the commandments. It was, you shall honor and love and obey your father. And he gave me the minimum rules, and it was like, okay, all right, I am not going to waste any more time. And it sort of set me free to find my own spirituality. And so spirituality has become more of a major part of who I am and what I teach. Although I certainly still do coaching, life coaching. And it was interesting how it evolved. I used to call myself in the beginning a life coach. Then I called myself a life and spiritual coach. Now I'm a spiritual life coach and the channeler of Sheltazar. Anyway, I've talked a bit, but that's how it unfolded. It was gradual. It was a little bit at a time, and it allowed me to shift and get in touch with who I am. And it's really kind of fascinating, because that was probably started in 2004. So we're approaching 20 years, and that's still continuing. There are still times where it's like, whoa, wow, this is changing. This is different. Even my connection to the unseen world continues to evolve. And so, one of the big things for me in that journey is I let go of the plan, because in business, I'll never forget, in business, we had to have goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bounded. We had to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. none of that applies to my life now at all.
There's so much good stuff to unpack. So number one, I love the inner child, what I call inner child stuff that you brought up. That I talked about it a little bit. I'm bringing it out more and more in terms of the show and the topics, that we have these early childhood things, these unconscious hidden motivations, hidden drivers. And I love how you touched on that we may even be going into a profession or a role. I mean, I grew up in a similar culture where literally you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and it was a pleasing pattern to be approved or liked. So I love how you touched on that, because I feel like so many leaders scoff at stuff like that and they go, oh, well, no. And it's very much they're on autopilot and they don't even realize it. And in fact, there's a business law case that I usually will use with leaders if I'm doing this type of work, because there's actually in America, there's jurisprudence. There's a case called the Van Gorkum case, which is about business judgment as a leader. And you can't be, and the wording is you can't be asleep at the wheel. And so many, I mean, I think that's what you're touching upon. We're playing this game and we're asleep at the wheel and we're in it for the wrong reason. And I love also another point that you had your awakening, let's call it, as a result of your business awakening, because the business is, as I call it, an extension of the leader, and you took over the family business and it was an extension. Growing pains is what I used to call it as a full-time lawyer. And then Robin Sharma, as I said, is kismet, because in 2015, a buddy of mine, let's call him a soul brother, from my, let's say, executive network life, it was an organization called Provisors. And he literally gave me that book. So it's really kismet, Jeffrey, because I didn't know about Robin Sharma. I didn't know he was an entertainment lawyer, and the book is kind of anecdotal of his journey. And so I love that you brought that up, because I'm blown away at what we're going to unpack more in this episode in terms of this. And you touched on it even beautifully without maybe noticing it, letting go of the plan. You know, Manya may have sensed these subtle layers before we met, and we can't intellectualize it. We can't think, oh, wow, you knew Robin Sharma too. Wow, that was influential on your path like it was for me, because I read it in Europe on a sabbatical. And literally that book changed my life. So it's fascinating, or as they say in Yiddish, kismet or synchronicity. So a lot to unpack. So I love all of that. And then this navigating both worlds. I want to get into that in a moment or so before we get into the more extrasensory and the mission and the hidden worlds, because I find that that's so much of what we're doing these days. I don't know about you. It's bringing the business acumen that we had. And even if you didn't have formal training, the 30 years running a successful mid-sized business in Canada of that nature, bringing that with the spiritual. And I sense that's what's happening more and more in the business space. More and more leaders are awakening and realizing, okay, I have this, let's call it this unseen part of us, right? What you call the unseen worlds, or I call it the hidden dimensions. And how do I bring this together? How do I synthesize this? How do I harmonize this? Real quick, let's go down this rabbit hole. What do you see in terms of the work you're doing as, let's call it, a spiritual life coach for leaders? Do you think that we're unique, or you feel like that's the future, that more and more leaders are going to have to do this navigation between these two worlds? Do you feel we're outliers, or do you feel this is going to be more commonplace in terms of this navigation and fusing of these spiritual and business worlds?
My honest opinion is I think the jury is still out. I think that we are we have the opportunity. I know the way we should be going if we want to sustain our humanity and our civilization. What
would that look like? Unpack that while you flow. What would that look like while you transition to what you feel will happen? Yeah.
What it would look like is that more people will be able to become more conscious. I think there are some ingrained beliefs or patterns about business, about money. As a matter of fact, I was rereading my journal. I'm in this process of rereading my journal from the beginning of my journey, and I'm up to 2006 now, so nice. I was a couple of years into it. And what was really neat is I came across a journal entry where I decided to have a conversation with a $20 bill, because I really like me and money, we've got this thing.
Andrew Jackson,
so-
not Ben Franklin. All right, that's so un-Jewish
Oh, it
of
was
you.
Canadian. It was Canadian. It was the
Okay.
Queen.
Oh, it was a Looney Tune. It was a Looney Tune. I thought you would go for the big denomination. Okay.
No, it was $20. It was $20. Okay, but the Queen's used to be on our $20.
Oh, that's right. You're
Back
Commonwealth, so you had Elizabeth on.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. But I think where we are in the movement now is there are people, there are executives, there are people involved in corporate who are starting to dabble in that personal growth, that personal development, that bigger understanding. I think we are a fair piece away from them having the courage, unless they are in a position of great authority and are not concerned about shareholders and being accountable to anyone else, that are prepared to bring it into the business. So I see it as the beginning of people walking in two rivers, that they've got a foot in both ponds. What would it look like? As a matter of fact, it's interesting because I've been contemplating that. I can't even fathom it. I cannot fathom yet how, I'm trying to teleport into an alternate universe to see how business can be done in this more conscious way. We are starting because of environmental issues. We're talking about climate change. We're just starting, but we haven't addressed the foundation yet. We haven't addressed the foundation. And it's kind of interesting, being an older guy like I am, we're seeing a lot of labor unrest at this time in the economic cycle. And it reminds me of the 70s. It reminds me, it's like, oh my God, we haven't heard of strikes in a while. There's been relative calm because inflation was under control. So I think this stirring up is helping us realize that there has to be new ways of organizing business, the institutions, the foundations, and I think we're going to be pushed to the limit. It's kind of interesting. Recently, I've had some experiences with artificial intelligence, Chat GPT, and it's like, whoa, is that ever neat? But gee, you got to be careful, right? You got to be careful. So I think we have technology, we have climate change, we have inflation, we have things coming together as the perfect storm. What it's going to look like, one of the important tenets of my spiritual beliefs is that we live in the planet of free choice. So I don't think there's a predestiny as to how business can be transacted in this altered universe, in this new world order. I got to be careful the words I use because it could be, it's like, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist. It doesn't matter doesn't matter what words we use. We are in this time where things are going to change. So what would it look like? It would look like more transparency. It would look like more openness. It would look more right brain, more feeling consciousness. There certainly would be greater support. The leaders, the decision makers, would have to let go a little bit of the insistence on the success measures of profitability and things like that. We have to move more. I mean, there's inklings of it, but I don't think we've got to the point of the big shift yet. There's
it's
like
percolating. It's not like
yes, it is.
tipping point.
That's been around for a while. It's been around, like the balanced scorecard. taking care of staff. Some of the technology people are doing it, but then all of a sudden they kowtow to the stakeholders, to the shareholders. So we're in that. I think in some cases we're in that transitionary period where we'll go forward 3 steps, and then we'll go back 1 or 2 steps. And so I think that's what it's going to look like. We have to get a better handle on money, profits, the energy of that, the importance, what is important, okay? Is the environment more important than? Is money more important than? Like, what are, so it is, one of those journal entries that I went back to a number of years ago was talking about value and exchange. So what are we valuing, and how can we shift that value system? Because money, profits, there's a lot of things in our value system that I think are ripe for challenging. And we have to challenge those if we're going to change business, because business is people, but it seems to have a life of its own. And so, you know, the path to get there, for me anyway, is to work with the people. Because the institution is the institution. It was created by the people, just like formalized religions and all other institutions, politics. I think there's going to be changes in politics too. I cannot look, not that I spend that much time looking at this, but I do not see a political system in the world that really makes sense in more of the new age energy that we're moving into. I cannot, you know, it's not dictatorship. It's not, even democracy is having some real problems.
You know, it's interesting because you said this notion of the foundations of leadership and organizations have been ignored. Most people don't look at the roots. What I started, it's interesting that you look back, I call it a post-mortem, and it develops my curriculum and goes into the books I'm developing, looking back at my early journals to note my progress, or looking at my own foundations, because it's interesting, right? I find more and more of the people that come to us, you know, in your work, in my work, even if we do it differently, it's after a trauma, it's after a crisis. It's after a necessity. Post-traumatic growth is the only way people like to grow, right? They don't want to, like you said, courage to actually make these changes. And even in your organization, right? You inherited it from your father. We have this ancestral patterns that we inherit. This translates into business. We get a culture that was incepted and then it's handed down. Nobody questions it. And it looks like for you, what it looks like for many of the clients I've seen, or in even my old life doing this work as a full-time lawyer, where you have to hire the consultant. See, you even mentioned it. We were looking at culture, and David Fisher came in and we started to examine the underpinnings, let's call it, of who we are as an organization, who we function. So democracy is actually, as I came to learn, I think 15 years ago, so I studied jurisprudence. Obviously, I was a lawyer. I love geopolitics, studied international law, worked at the UN. And I came to learn democracy, the etymology, the foundations, the roots of the word, the codex, is actually mob rule. It's order by chaos. So in a weird way, we've devised the society with not actually looking at some of the underpinnings, not questioning, hey, why did I get into this family business? You know, and I think you're unique. You're ahead of the curve, a way show. That's why you're on the show, because I would say until we get sick, until we get a divorce, until we have a crisis, us leaders, especially successful ones, we're like, oh, we're doing great. And you touched on it. We have the metrics, the old metrics. We've talked about this a lot on the show, this notion of the metrics and what does it look like? And I was actually talking to Manya the other day. How do we measure currently spiritual progress as a spiritual entrepreneur? What are the metrics? What are the KPIs? What are the key performance indicators for let's say a new earth business, to get real woo-woo in it? So question for you, what resistances, since we're still in this unpacking of like the before and after, what resistances do you see in yourself that you've had to overcome in terms of building a spiritual business? Because I'll tee it up this way. I had to overcome a lot of soul curriculum, a lot of soul work, a lot of soul trauma retrieval, really advanced work around selling out. My older brother works with celebrities and he's an elite, and I've always grappled with, I don't want to sell out. I don't want to sell out. And I love how you talked about the energy of money. I want to stay true to my values. I don't want to be off course. So I don't know if that resonates for you, or what's been your struggle. That was mine. So I don't want to sell out. And I struggled making money early the last few years because I was doing so much pro bono. Even on Insight Timer, I was offering 3-4 hour events and not knowing my limits and not knowing my boundaries. So I'm curious, what was your process around something?
Mine is very similar, but I want to go back to what you talked about before in terms of the metrics. Okay.
Oh, the KPIs. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think maybe that's part of the problem.
Talk to me,
I think
Goose.
metrics is very left brain. I'll never forget one of my coaches. Think about this one, okay? And I love this because the I don't want to call it the challenge. The most interesting part of this is I
Opportunity.
am deeply spiritual and I understand the invisible realm to the best of my ability. I don't think I'll ever really fully understand it, but how do I bring it into that real world, right? So I cringe when you talk about metrics, just like I cringe about a lot of other things. This coach, we're having this conversation, and we were talking about, the glass half empty, the glass half full philosophy, right?
Okay.
What are you going to be? Are you going to be positive? Are you going to be negative? Are you going to be the glass half empty or the glass half full? And he said to me, well, what if you just believed that the glass was overflowing? So there is no choice. Oh, wait, it gets better. There is no choice as to whether it's half empty or half full. It's overflowing. So there's that abundance mentality. And I thought about that for a little while. And then he blew me out of the water and he said, what happens if there is no glass?
He went Zen master on you. There is no container.
So if we are talking about these metrics, if we are talking about measurement, my measurement of my soul progress is not measurable. It's intuitive. It is a feeling. It is a okay. How and it's interesting you say that, because when I'm in a situation that used to be uncomfortable with family or people talking politics or whatever, I am constantly measuring, okay, or aware of would be a better term. How am I responding to those kind of conversations today versus how I was 5 years ago? And it's like, oh, it doesn't seem to trigger me as much. It doesn't seem to bother me as much. Oh, I can see that other person's point of view without arguing back. Oh, okay, I am making progress. And so I think one of the things we have to do— I love how
you unpack that. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things we have to do in business is we got to get rid of things like the metrics, right? Like what feels. I mean, one of the biggest things that I've learned from Sheltazar is to move away from the logical mind and move more to the feeling consciousness. So how does my business feel? If you ask me that, it feels great. It feels in conflict a little bit because every once in a while, when we call it business, I think of the old way. I think of the metrics. I think of, right? It's like, and I know that, right? I'm investing in a bunch of things. We're creating an Oracle card deck. And it's like, I'm thinking, okay, well, if it costs this much and I sell it for this, what's the profit? And it's like, I get a kick in the proverbial ass from Sheltazar saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you measuring? So
interesting.
So for me, it is basically showing up as a person in that aspect of my life and business. The most important part, if I take on the role of businessman, if I look at it like a business, I'm no different than when I was the CEO and let that title define who I was. I am Jeffrey Eisen, who is bringing value to the planet, and I am working on figuring out how I can get compensated with a value, with an exchange that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I love how you unpack that, because that's actually where our conversation went the other day when we brought it up, because I said that, and when I taught this a while back, it was like a few months ago, I think I was actually in England and I did an Insight Timer event, and it was about what I labeled it as, how do you wake up from hell? How do you get out of these lower vibrations when you have especially a lot of soul trauma like I did, inner child wounding and all this gunk, let's call it. And I said to them, and it's refreshing to hear, because that's where Manya and I went, because it's a feeling, because I was saying to the audience, I can jot my progress this way. I wake up happy. I know that a year ago I had to fake it, even as early as a year ago, let alone 2015 when I burned out and I took my sabbatical. And so I love how you brought it up similarly. It's very confirmational to hear that from you as another leader, because I go, okay, we're all headed in a similar direction. Especially when we all ping one another, that's how I know there's some truth, objective truth to the direction. And so it's interesting.
sorry, before you
Yeah.
go on, sorry
Yeah,
to
yeah,
interrupt
yeah.
because
No,
I
please
want
do.
another antidote of
Yeah.
what we're talking
Spit
about
it
to
out.
drive
Yeah.
it home. That same Dave Fisher, I was having some challenges with my brother, who was my partner, and he was sort of the intermediary. And I'll never forget this conversation because he tried to help us understand, or help me understand. I think I got it maybe more than my brother. Help me understand, why there was this conflict and what the difference was. And I remember him saying to me, Jeffrey, you have to understand that your brother is very journey focused and you are destination focused. And I said, yes, that's the way it's supposed to be. Well, here we are, how many years later? And it's like, holy crap, did I ever have it wrong? And so when we talk about measurements, it isn't about a destination. It is about the journey. So we want, the measurements can be very subjective, and they can measure our progress, but I have no idea. I'm 71. I have no idea what it's going to be when I transition off the planet and back home. I have no idea. But I know in the next number of years, if I have numbers of years left, I will be measuring my direction, my progress, my evolution, my transformation. But I really have absolutely no desire to set goals as to where I will be as a person or as a businessman when this human life is over. So
I love how you said that. Well, because here's how I see it. I mean, to put some cogency to what we're talking about and make it more like put it in a bite-sized morsel, as I like to do. It's this notion of the whole person, holistic. And I see it as Buckminster Fuller, the classic quote, you don't fight the existing system, you create a new one. I don't think we can throw out left hemisphere. I don't think we could throw out planning. It's planning and flowing, because even earlier you said, let go of the plan. And I call that the intellectualization, because you can't be in intuition or flow, flow psychology. Now science is catching up to some of these ancient wisdom teachings. You can't be in the intellectual brain and then an intuitive center, as we're going to unpack when we get into more of the extrasensory work that you and I do. So I look at it as you have to have left hemisphere and right hemisphere. Like you said, you have to plan for your legacy and know that when the final veil is lifted and you physically transition from this plane, so that's the right hemisphere, embracing the mystery, as I've come to learn. So I love that, because I think on psychometrics or these profile tests that I used to love even more back in the days when I was so black and white and categorizational, I would say you're probably like me. I would say on Myers-Briggs, you probably score an EP. You sound like an EJ. You're a destination. Are we there yet kind of a person? And your brother sounds like Manya, either an introvert, because I think you seem like an introvert to me, or a perceiving type on Myers-Briggs. So they tend to be more of like enjoying the progress as long as. So it's funny that you bring that up, because we need to start looking at the whole person, the whole organization. You didn't go to Robin Sharma and go, okay, I'm only going to look at this piece of Jeffrey in terms of the leader Jeffrey in the organ. You looked at all of Jeffrey. How does Jeffrey show up as the son in the organization, the son in the family constellation, as a brother, as a businessman, as a husband? And so that's how I see it. It's more holistic. I sense that we're all striving for bringing back all of it, or piecing it so it's left and right hemisphere. This is good.
It is about balance. You're 100% right. And I don't know if we'll ever find the balance. Balthazar leads me to believe that balance we're always really in a process of rebalancing. If you get balance, it's going to be out of balance. But you're absolutely right. It is important. And anything I talk about, please, don't misconstrue. We definitely need the left brain, because we have to.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you from my left brain, right? I mean, if the brain was there, if we had the lobotomy, you'd just be looking at Jeffrey, right? Okay. So what's coming through needs to be translated.
Grounded in reality,
right,
logic,
right.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I find that so missing, and I don't want to poo-poo anybody. Or I find that when I first, let's say, realized, I'm supposed to do this type of work, and I entered, let's say, the spiritual scene and became the new kid, as it were, I realized that very quickly that there was a lot of, let's say, ungroundedness. And as a businessman, it was difficult, because as I intended to strive for the harmony or the balance, as you call it, I was like, okay, sure, I was too formal, too stuffy. Even recently, as I'm birthing my site, I realized I'm still doing lawyer consulting. I'm requiring so much paperwork of people, and my conversion rate dropped. And I realized, wait a second, Haas, you're still coming at them as a lawyer. And so there's been a lot of learning. And I say that to say these are the layers that we have to peel back. So it's interesting because what came forward for me is I realized, oh, this is the balance I need to strike, because as much as I'm projecting onto some of these other healers that are super disassociated and not grounded in reality, I may be too much this way and too planning or too much of a pretense orientation. This is interesting. So, okay, question for you. In terms of the business environment, do you, when you deal with business leaders as clients, or let's say if you're speaking, do you actually say feeling, intuition? Like how far, I guess my question is, how far do you take it currently in your current iteration when you do work in corporate? Because I find I've gone too far, which has been inspiring for some, and I'm still striving for that. What is palatable, accessible, relatable enough? You called it translating, which we'll get into. What do you find? What's your barometer? What's your litmus test of the current culture? Let's use that word in corporate. How far do you go? What do you feel they're ready for? How do you play with pushing the envelope? I feel like some people in the audience may be spiritual entrepreneurs, and maybe they'll benefit from this type of a, how do you approach it from a marketing, from a curriculum, from a speaking perspective?
Great question. Thank you. First of all, I have evolved. When I was doing this a while ago, I probably came from that perspective. You know, as you realized you were a lawyer long after you were not a lawyer, right? And so I got so excited about my beliefs that I probably was a little bit too pushy in putting forth my beliefs and therefore alienating some people. I'm a big fan of not the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, but the platinum rule, treat people the way they want to be treated. So more recently, I get a sense of the person, and I think I've been getting pretty good at dropping some hints, you know, like you don't go in and talk about angels right away. You talk about coincidences. You talk about a sixth sense. You get, you know, and then you gauge where they're at, because most business leaders are a lot of business leaders are kind of afraid to show that part of them. So I try to make them comfortable. It's like, come sit down on the couch with me, and you know, and so the other thing I want to say is, whenever I work with corporate leaders, I do not work with them as a corporate leader. I start out by looking at them, at the person. Okay, they will bring up their corporate issues. Okay, but we never ever start with, okay, and if we do, I'm able to sort of navigate that conversation back to, well, how does that make you feel, and all of those things. So I sort of disarm people by not looking at them in terms of their vocation or their career, but looking at them as an individual. Okay? And then we're able to bring back the corporate or the leadership or the vocational part. I had a client this morning who is extremely intuitive. She's in user experience, and she's in the UK, and she works for the financial services, financial advisors. And she's so frustrated because they don't care about the client and all of those things. And I said, come on, they're in money. That's all about fear and greed and lack. And, you know, let's have a little understanding for these people. Right? We're gonna have to meet them part way. We're gonna have to understand that they get paid. They get to keep their job based on financial performance. So I think the key is, in order to find out where they are on the scale. And you know, one of the mistakes I made early is, when I heard the word spiritual, I automatically made an assumption that was my definition of spiritual.
I love that.
And it's a continuum. It's a continuum, right? Even people, I will never, ever forget. I've been coaching a chiropractor for probably about the longest time, about 5 years. And I asked him about his, his spiritual beliefs. And he told me that, he was a devout Christian, and it's like, oh, okay, how did I wind up with this guy? And today, I mean, these days, he asked me to help him with his dreams. He asked me to get a sense of the energy, so. But that took quite a while, because that's what he believed he was. And I just opened him up in terms of just a little bit wider definition of what that might mean. So it's a long answer, but I don't really go in and talk about their vocation. Okay, that's it comes up, but often I find that their upbringing, their relationship in their family, that's what's causing the issues in their business. And so, as you said before, it's the whole person. So if I just talked about their corporate experience, I'm getting such a small sliver of who they are.
It's interesting, because I find that we're doing more, basically we're doing for other people what we had to do for ourselves in our awakening journey, because it's, and real quick, I want to segue to this because it kind of rounds out this leaving corporate, because you talk about the clients hiding it, masking it. Earlier, you said the courage to do some of this thing, whether it be simply people over profits, or to go as far as to bring intuition, let's say, into your business as a leader in terms of your decision making, which is what we're going to unpack today. I'm curious for you. It's almost like, how did you? Let me rephrase this. Let me put it this way. Did you know when you were a child you had these gifts? So let's put yourself in the chiropractor shoes, right? You grew up devout Jewish, or your family was. He grew up devout Christian. I grew up devout Shiite Muslim. And so we have these programs, right? We adopt these conditionings. They're in our consciousness field. And then I was scared. I incrementally brought myself out in the legal space. I've talked about it on the show somewhat, talk about it a lot when I teach. More and more, I'm going to be bringing it into books and stuff like that and curriculum. So I realized, and I'm sure, and I want to hear your rendition on this, because I feel like, we're really helping them come out of the proverbial spiritual closet, because some of us have these gifts, and our suffering is because we've masked our God-given gifts. So I'm curious, did you know when you were a child? Because I didn't know. I personally had to learn, this is soul retrieval. I can do psychic surgery. This is what I do. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know. Did you have a sense, a knowing, which relates to the clients? Because did you know you were masking, or did you come back and realize?
I didn't have a clue until I was 50.
Okay, so talk to me about, so when you're 50, what did it, like, you unpacked it and did you go, holy shit,
the book
my whole life I've suppressed? Yeah.
Okay, like don't forget, I didn't take psychology. I didn't take any of those things. I dropped I actually, my first year of university, because that was in the early 70s. I came out of a school system that was either the technical or the academic, and I was good in math and science. So even though I told the guidance counselor I probably want to go into my family business, but I'm really good at math and science, and I want to get a challenging education and develop my brain, so I'm going to take the hardest maths and sciences offered at the University of Toronto. And God bless that counselor. They said, sure, that's a great idea.
And they set yourself up for torture.
But I got to tell you, it was about the worst advice. I go into university, I'm taking maths and science, I'm getting clobbered. It is so difficult. I realize there's a business course. So I switch in second year to a Bachelor of Commerce, and it was so easy, because compared to maths and sciences, I kind of felt guilty. I went from working 50, 60 hours a week with classes and labs and stuff like that to maybe 15 and having fun. And it's like, that's not fair. I better get back and help my father in business. And that's why I quit. So did I have any clue? No, I didn't read any spiritual books. I went to synagogue. As I look back, there was an affinity. There was an affinity that I didn't recognize because I was hung up in the rules and regulations. But the chanting and the whatever, as I look back now, there was an inkling, but it was so.
What are the clues?
up.
Real quick, unpack them from your journey. Sorry to interject. What were your clues? So you said you started to touch on it. I heard you say chant. So like, let's say the audience is listening and they haven't reached that churning point, as you called it, or the awakening point to be like, I'm one of the people. Everybody has extrasensory gifts, as we're going to unpack the preface if you're listening. So it's not your special. Some have more, and we'll unpack all this in a few moments. What are the signs? Now looking back, hindsight's 2020. If they're not in that hindsight mode, how can they start to discern? So you had an affinity for what kind of things looking back? Well, what would be some, let's say, breadcrumbs that we can offer the audience, let's say?
Well, my advice is I did not become aware of the signs until I rebalanced my yin and yang. Until, don't forget, growing up as a young Jewish man, we were taught all of the masculine patriarchal things. So sensitivity was a weakness. You know, my late uncle passed away. He was near and dear to me. I was 16 years old, and I was told, be strong. And so I could not recognize the signs because I was not encouraged to be a feeler. I was not encouraged to open up that part of me. So I would suggest for any listener, it's important to get your yin yang rebalance, to open up the sensitivity. Now, from a world perspective, we are, I believe, moving towards accepting that a bit more. For the part of the world that is more open to what is happening in women's rights, LGBTQ, all of that, we are becoming a little bit more sensory, more sensitive, more feeling, right? And even in corporate, I mean, if you go to the HR department, and you go to sensitivity training, talk about a sign that came retrospectively. In second year, in order to transition from maths and sciences, I had to take some courses so that, some credits. So you look for the things called bird courses, right, that would go on your record. I wound up taking a course called sensitivity training. We went off on a retreat where I came back and realized I hated my parents. Okay? Little did I know that that's the work that I would be doing. So that was a hint, but I wasn't open enough to realize, oh my goodness, there's this. I mean, it was just one course, but if I would have been exposed to more of that, I would have realized a little bit more of who I was and what made me tick, and that there was more of a sensitivity within my authentic self than the thinking man. I had a belief back in the corporate days, I had a belief system that the person with the most thoughts wins the game. So when I would get up and get in the shower in the morning, it was like, turn that machine on.
Yeah.
Let's start the thinking. So
think. Yeah.
Right. So I guess if our advice to the listeners is, you have to shift your awareness to what you may not be aware of. Otherwise, you're not going to see the signs.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. So did you have, like earlier you mentioned, so did you have, like, looking back, a proclivity towards, let's say, what you call the unseen worlds? Because chanting, you mentioned, like, looking back, are there any, for me, for instance, my mom pointed this out. I used to go into the bathroom. I'd take awfully long in the bathroom, mainly because I would process my thoughts. Only once I came into the calling that I'm in now, I realized technically, and then human design and all these other stuff that I learned, I'm actually really clairsentient, and I actually pick up a lot of different frequencies. So I was actually talking to what you would call beings or entities or otherworldly energies, or some people like Janet Richmond in last season of the show calls it the higher selves. We have literally different versions of other dimensions of us. So I realized, for instance, looking back, and I had that, it clicked 2-3 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm psychic, because technically, and my mom was like, who are you talking to? And I was ashamed. I would hide it. It was like, oh no, like I'm going to come off like a kook ball. So did you have anything like that now looking back, that was like a proclivity or a way of being, for instance, that fits the mold, as we would say, that you have these gifts?
The thing is that, as you pointed out, I don't think we're meant to note them. until we begin the journey. So it's sort of,
You're getting very multidimensional, Jeff.
Well, you don't know what you don't know until you start to know, right? Okay.
You created the curriculum to unpack it.
I mean, as you're talking, these small, I'm kind of fortunate. I think all of our characteristics have a positive and negative side to them. Balthazar has taught me, and so I don't have a great memory of a lot of things, right? And so that does enable me to move on and be more in the present moment. But I had an imaginary friend, Oogly Woogly, and I etched him in the dresser beside me. I got a lot of hell for that one, by the way. But who knew that Oogly Woogly was maybe the beginnings of Balthazar? I don't know. But do you see what I'm saying? As you're going through it, you don't have the consciousness or the capability to see it. So I highly encourage people, no matter where you are in your journey now, just look back from a place of inquisitiveness to some of those quirky things that you experienced and try to put on a more mature lens looking back, saying, I wonder what that was trying to tell me. I wrote a poem. I mean, I never fit in. I was really, it was really difficult. I'm really okay with not fitting in now, but I'm 71. It's a little bit easier. But I remember writing this poem. What was it? I am what I am. That's all that I am. That's all that I'll ever be. So remember, my friend, that a man of himself is much better than two of some other. Who knew that that was the beginnings of me finding my authentic self and helping other people to find, right? It was a hurting teenager that came up with that. But in retrospect, it was something a lot deeper. So I hear what you're saying, but I think when we're going through it, there's a limited ability to sense it. Okay. And therefore just keep wherever you are, look back for the hints. But look, I think in retrospect, it's easier to see them than when you're going through them.
Well, you hit a really potent point, because this is a curriculum. We come here to experience things. And so it's the analogy I learned growing up, proverbial Sunday school, was if you had all the answers, then you wouldn't be here to take the test. So in a way, that's what Jeffrey's alluding to. And a great point that, yes, you actually created these blockages and these traumas from a soul level to actually unpack them. So it would defeat the purpose if you actually knew what your gifts were, because the appreciation of the gift is from learning it yourself and unpacking it yourself versus, let's say, getting the answer, as it were. I love that. Yeah, it was very subtle catch there, Jeffrey. Very subtle.
Well, if you stop and think about it, there is a progression from experiencing what is wrong to discovering and changing and becoming what is right. I have coached a lot of people, and I rarely, and met a lot of people. I haven't come across anyone that had it right at the beginning of their life and had nothing to do in terms of working it out. Hundreds, thousands of people, it's the other way around. You go through the crap and you get an opportunity to wake up. That's what's exciting to me, is more and more people are waking up. More and more people are taking that journey, whether they're corporate leaders, no matter who they are becoming aware of that progression. And I think that's really, really, really important.
I love how you call it a progression, because as we're going to get into the actual technical subject matter today, every energy is even on a spectrum, and these unseen worlds and these extrasensory spectrums of energy and information it's a continuum. And what the work I do, I call it ascension, which is a raising of our frequency, a raising of our light quotient. And it is a progression. Real quick, before we get into this, accessing the unseen world, and start to actually get into the nitty gritty of what we're going to take the audience through in terms of how do you access your gifts and things like that, and the practical benefits, going down let's say the second half of all of this. You touched on something that's really big. Obviously, it's the title, Vulnerable Power. And I had a soul brother, also Jewish ancestry, and I would say we all share similar cultural woundings. And I remember doing the work with him and his organization. One of the things I realized in doing this is that to access gifts, and I think we've touched this, and I wanted to really flush it out, and I'm curious your input on this, is that you have to realize, and I think you highlighted this, you have to heal. You have to realize that these sensitivities have been churned off culturally. Maybe the conditioning, you know, men don't cry, or even women have it, and it's not only a patriarchy thing or a masculine thing. And I realized that a lot of us are in the red, to use a financial terminology. We've actually had our natural senses and all these gateways we're going to unpack in a few minutes turned off. So we have to actually reattune, kind of recalibrate, retool to these sensitivities. Some of us are going to be on this continuum more sensitive or extrasensory than others. And it's interesting because this soul brother, he said, oh, and the epiphany he had doing this work with me last year was, oh, I inherited this from my parents. Oh, this is a cultural thing. Oh, in the Yiddish culture, we're taught that we're not worthy to forgive ourselves. So there's a lot of layers of, holy shit, I didn't know I wasn't feeling, and I was conditioning myself to basically be desensitized. So I'm curious for you, how did you deal with it yourself? How did you reattune? Because this starts to ink us, it gets us into that conversation of the gifts. How did you recalibrate, let's say, your pitching fork, your antenna, your sensitivity? Because you touched on it and you've broken it down in different ways throughout this first hour. I'm curious what tips you would give in terms of what you did for yourself or how you do it with clients, because I think this is something we should impress. Because people don't realize that the sensitivity is a strength and that there's a continuum. And if you turn it all off, you're not going to be able to do anything we're about to talk about.
A real turning point for me was early in my journey, you know, as well as doing all of that, the book reading and workshops, as I certainly sampled a lot of healing modalities. And I'll never forget this beautiful shaman woman who had me on her table and did a body scan. And I've had gastrointestinal issues my whole life. Didn't realize until I began my journey. And she scanned my body, and everything in the lower chakras, everything in the gastrointestinal area, she described as a tar field of unexpressed emotions.
Woo! You had what I had, bro. Keep going. Oh, wow.
And I'll never forget that experience. I was crying, I was coughing, I was in the fetal position, and naively thinking when I left her facility, good, glad that's over. Now I'm finished to get to move on. And of course, you know,
when was this? Chronologically, when is this? Chronologically, when is this?
When I was probably 2006, 2007. So
as you're unpacking this, up until that point, did Human Jeffrey know he had all this shit in this tar pit?
Oh, no. I mean, I knew that I inherited gastro issues. I had Crohn's disease. I had bleeding ulcers when I was 18. I had to get a blood transfusion. Don't forget, I was raised with the belief that the way I was doing it was the right way. So it took that shift of someone saying, you may want to consider, because you're doing harm to yourself, to get in touch with these emotions. And I'm like the poster guy for emotions now. Sheltazar has told me that emotions are truth. And the person I was coaching this morning, I was helping her interpret a feeling, an emotion she had, and it led to a real opening and a real insight, because that emotion was not what she thought it was. Sheltazar leads me to believe that those emotions are truth and they're telling you something. And so if you suppress them, speaking again of rereading the journal, I read another journal entry in the last few days where I was talking to my body. Oh, and my body told me that when I am not the authentic me, I am causing blockages in my body.
I love it.
Yeah.
As far as energy science is, that's spot on.
Exactly. So the first step, I guess, is to challenge, if you don't believe in the feeling consciousness, if you believe that feelings are weak, if you believe that sensitivity is a weakness, that's for the girls, not the guys. And some girls have said, oh, I want to get ahead, so they don't feel. You have to open up to the possibility that we are both, that our yin and our yang, our masculine, our feminine, we have to realize that we are both, and we have to find that balance within ourselves. If people are going to deny that, if people are going to fight and always be logical, right? And I have had a number of clients over the years, there's not much you can do. There's really not much you can do, because it's the foundation work to make the change. Okay, like you're living a partial life, like I was for the first 50 years, because I denied myself my wholeness. I denied all of me. I was only catering to part of me. So that's, my advice is just be open to that and realize. And one of the things that I learned to help drive that point home was what Sheltazar taught me. Everything we want in life is a feeling. And so I challenge people when they talk about a career, when they talk about a car, when they talk about a house. Okay, all of the things you want, all of that more left brain yang is not what you think it is, it's the feeling you think it will give you.
Ooh.
And when you start realizing that everything you want in life, you want to be more successful in business. I want to be more successful in business. I want to share my love and wisdom with the world more. I don't want that. I want the feeling it gives me to be on your esteemed show, to be here talking about my passion makes me feel good. One could say, oh, Jeffrey wants to be on podcasts. He wants to be on shows. Well, I get to the next show and, the guy's a flaming whatever, and it's painful and it's uncomfortable. I don't want to be on shows. I want the feeling of speaking my truth. I want the feeling of sharing my wisdom. And so I often am able to get people to acquiesce to opening up to their feeling consciousness by making them realize that everything they want, it's not the vacation, it's how you think the vacation will make you feel. It's not the money, it's how you think that and it's not money, it's financial security, it's financial freedom. So I do a lot of work with people, making them realize that those feelings are important and try to neutralize what they've been taught that it's a weakness. And when that light bulb goes on, that, yeah, you're right, everything I want is a feeling. And I'm saying, how are you ever going to know you're going to get there if you don't open up to your feelings? Oh, sorry about that. One of my crystals went boom. So if you chase that goal and then you get disappointed, I mean, is that what you want your life to be? So why waste all of that time chasing the goal when you are using a very logical goal as opposed to the true measure of what you want, which is the feeling,
the vibration, the resonance. Well, it's interesting, right? Because I sense that the human condition is that the fear, whether we look at it as corporate leaders opening up to the cultural shifts they need to make and the leadership changes they need to make, or we look at it as, oh my God, I don't want to, this is taboo. I grew up Muslim. This is devil worship. And I don't want to go into these hidden, unseen worlds. Or if you look at it as machismo, sensitivity, either way, I look at it as once you confront the fear, you open up, you have the courage, you're turning your tuning fork back on. You're attuning, because what you described to me, I go, you're speaking feeling terminology, emotions. Well, I'm hearing, oh, you're recalibrating, you're reattuning to the subtlety that everything is energy and everything's spectrums of energy, light and sound, quantum physics, photons and phonons. And then you literally are showing people by being it yourself, it sounds like, that, yeah, you have to feel into these vibrations because even the thoughts are vibrations, and we're giving these more measure, more weight than all these other things, which are driving forces. And I think for you, you already said it throughout this episode, this notion of how 50 years you weren't as alive as the last 20, because I love how you said this, you denied yourself, you denied parts of yourself, you suppressed parts of yourself, and that's where the sensitivity is a strength. And I think that's where this other soul brother coming from a similar cultural background had an epiphany. Oh, I'm liberating myself and my entire family. My uncle, who was also Jewish and couldn't cry, and he saw the liberation he was giving, which I think is part of your mission, right? It's your mission is to help shift the consciousness of the planet one individual at a time. I think Gandhi called that be the change. We're all interlinked energetically. And if I want that oscillation, that frequency, that emotion, that energy in the field of the world, I got to admit it. I got to have it within myself. So I love that you're embodying that. You're accessing that yourself.
It's interesting, I'll just show you what is
Yeah.
in here under my computer. And
Oh, is that Tesla?
Nikola Tesla.
Yeah,
if you want to
my
find
buddy.
the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And it's kind of interesting because I know you are a big fan of that energy. What I've come to realize is that your emotions are the way we get to measure our frequency and vibration. So we should not be afraid of those emotions that are unpleasant, uncomfortable. Some people call them bad. The late Wayne Dyer taught, and I'm a subscriber of that emotions are not bad or good. They're lower and slower, higher or faster, pleasant, unpleasant, and
spectrums.
Right, exactly. And if you're out of touch with your feelings, with your emotions, you're out of touch with how you're vibrating, and then you are creating unconsciously. Ooh, right.
Which is that Van Gorkum case. You're asleep behind the wheel. And then we're wondering why we have toxic ecosystems in business and law, you name it, because we have all of these, let's say, inherited, whether it be culturally inherited, family inherited, through your organization's cultural inheritance. So I love that. So let's shift gears here. Let's start talking about this. The title of the event, when I first saw you on Insight Tower, because Manya said reach out to him, is, I believe you call it the unseen worlds, accessing the unseen worlds.
Yeah, connecting to the unseen.
Connecting to the unseen world. So we have another soul brother that I reached out to you last week. I said, oh, Wolfgang, I recorded with him. And we go real extra dimensional, talking about ghosts and paranormal. So I feel like this episode really goes hand in hand with that, because what do you mean by that? Let's start to get into this water and into the deep end, the proverbial deep end of the pool in our topics today. What do you mean by that? The accessing the unseen world? Because I call it the hidden dimensions, right? The mystical realms. Yeah.
Right. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is it doesn't matter what we call it. And I think the variety of things we call it is because none of us know for sure. And one of the most foundational things for me, there's an ancient text called the Kabbalion. And the Kabbalion,
oh yeah, I love that. Yeah, keep going.
Is the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, the Hermetic philosophy. And there's a line in there that is imprinted in my brain. They refer to that higher power, the highest power, known as God, Yahweh, the source, the universe, whatever you wish to call it. And you can see, even in that, we don't know what to call it. They call it the all.
All, yeah.
And there's a line in there that says the all is unknowable and unthinkable. And I would add to that unimaginable. And so therefore, it doesn't matter what we call what is beyond the physical realm. We just know it's there, and we must be content that we will never have all of the answers. And I remember a young man coming to my sanctuary once, and I was talking about this, and he looked at me and he said, I really have great admiration for you. You have such passion about trying to figure out something you know you will never, ever figure out. And it's like, yeah. And I really embrace that. So the reason I call it the unseen world is because it's everything that we don't see. It's everything that is beyond the physical. It's everything that is vibrating beyond solid. And anything that I teach, I make it quite clear that it's just my perspective. The most important part is to have your own personal relationship with that unseen world, because I can't tell you that mine is the best, and I think you would agree, Haas, you can't say yours is the best, but it works for us, and that's important. So whatever I teach, I certainly put the caveat in that that's just my belief, but you got to find your own. And that, by the way, is one of the things that I don't find as appealing about structured religion, is it encourages you to follow a doctrine, whereas I encourage people to find their own spirituality. find a spirituality that makes you feel good. We're talking about, like, if you want the job to make you feel good, if you want the vacation to make you feel good, if you want the money in the bank to feel good, why wouldn't you find a spiritual belief to make you feel good, keeping in mind you're never going to be. I keep doing that.
No, that's okay. I can't hear anything when you bang it, by the way. Well, it's interesting because when I'm hearing you, let's say if I play devil's advocate, somebody could say, well, what if you become a maniacal and you want to feel things that, let's say, objectively we would say evil? I would say then the litmus test, because you're almost inviting people to follow their inner GPS. I call that the inner guru. Guru, as my older brother once spelled it to me as a kid. And I was like, oh, the inner guru is me. It was very pithy and wordplay. And it sounds like that's what you're insinuating, which bingo, I echo that as well. And it's this notion of you're starting to go beyond the intellectual mind, right? You're starting to open up and get there. I'm wondering, let's start to unpack this from a human perspective. When Jeffrey first steps into the unseen world as a former corporate exec type, sure, he's done Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. club and all this stuff and other coaches and books, and it must be kind of scary. I know it was for me when I saw Thoth 2015, who's actually Hermes Trice Reborn, the author of when I saw him for the first time, I was like, what the freak? This is, pardon my French, it was the F word, and and I freaked out and I like ran for the hills. What was Jeffrey's experience when he starts to unpack his extrasensory gifts and he starts to get into these other realms, let's say the unseen realms? What was human Jeffrey when he first started to open up? Let's call it that. What did it feel like?
It's kind of interesting because, and I know a lot of people are scared, and I know a lot of people, my Insight Timer lives are talking about the ghosts and the darkness. It is my belief that is not the higher realm. Again, it's just my choosing.
Oh yeah, you can go up, you can go down. Correct. Yeah.
Right. But what that is your filter. That is your filter. And so I subscribe to the belief that higher power, that higher realm is all knowing, all being, all love. It's total unconditional love. So if you're feeling the darkness, that's your translation or transcription of what's coming through you. I was very fortunate because, as I mentioned before, one of the practices that Robin Sharma taught me was journaling.
Was the journaling.
In the beginning,
writing.
Yeah. In the beginning, that journaling, that automatic writing or core writing, was simply getting in touch with that tar field that the shaman revealed, right? Okay, so I had to sort of heat up the tar field and pour it onto the paper. I hate my mother, I hate my father, I hate this.
All the suppressed stuff, all
right.
that, 50 years
and
of
it
shit.
starts coming out. Now, what was kind of interesting is I enjoyed the journaling process. It was kind of, the meditation, the getting up early. So I kept it, even though I think I was getting much better at connecting to those unexpressed feelings and feeling more regularly. So what happened in the journaling is I started just asking for advice, and advice started to come through on the paper. And so my first connection to that unseen world was very loving, mother-father-like, coming back with this great wisdom. In the beginning, I thought I was talking to the source. And by the way, just as an aside, we're talking about religion. When I embarked on this journey, I could not call that higher power God because it was sort of representative of the religion. So I had to rename it Source, right? Now I'm real easy at going back and forth, God, Source, whatever. But I needed to give it a new name so that I could see it in a different light. You will notice this is a bugaboo of mine, I'm going to bring it up. I refer to that higher power, to the supreme being, the great creator, as it, not out of disrespect, but I have great difficulty believing it could be a he or a male.
Interesting. Well, I call it the alpha and the omega, the him and the her, because technically it's all. And I love what you're fleshing out, because I lost my train of thought earlier, because what I was going to say is, let's say the person wants a negative thing. Let's call it a negative thing. These are all natural pathways. Feeling is natural and we churn it off. So even if you want a thing that is unnatural, or let's call it evil, you won't feel good about it, because we have baseline things that won't feel good. And then the other thing that I let's put it this way. There's almost like you're presenting a methodology that's organic or natural, not synthetic, or because you're almost like, well, Haas, there's realms. You can go sideways, this way, down. I mean, for the audience, if you're new to this stuff, yeah, there's dimensions and lower and higher and parallel, sideways. And I love it. You're like, Haas, I don't mess with any of that. I literally go straight up. I go to the all, the eternal, the oneness. Yeah. It sounds like that's more or less what you're doing. You're not messing around and going down, let's say, making yourself susceptible to being led, let's say, into unnatural realms, for a lack of a better description. It sounds like.
For me, that original connection was for guidance, and it gave me guidance, and it continued. And as I mentioned, in my journal, I thought I was talking to God, and somewhere down the line, I guess God said, okay, I'm too busy for you. I'm going to give you over to Shaltazar, and they'll take care of you.
I'm handing you off to management.
But I love Shaltazar.
You got a junior associate. God's a lawyer. You got a from partner to junior.
Yeah, but they're really good for me, so that's fine. And so for me, it is about that guidance. It is about understanding. One of my mantras that I continue to say to this day is, and I refer to it as Shaltazar, I believe it doesn't matter what you call that invisible world, okay? We have this propensity to give it a name, to give it character, to give it,
anthropomorphize it.
Yeah, we got to put wings on the angels and stuff like that. So it's really important. And Shaltazar made it quite clear that it's just a name I've given them, and it doesn't really matter what you call that higher power. But my mantra is, show me the way to higher levels of consciousness for what is in my highest good and the highest good of all concerned. So I am always, and I'm getting that. I am getting this education because I want to understand that which I will never fully understand, but I'm trying to understand it. So I get that guidance. So it really depends what you want that connection for. I'm a big fan of intention, because
you're going to say the word I was about to say. You got it. Yeah, keep going.
That intention is, and I've done a lot of work. I've learned a lot about the laws of creation and the laws of manifestation, and that intention is really, really important. So, and what I also like to teach is, you have to kind of define the relationship you want with that unseen world. And for me, it is about guidance. It is about wisdom. It is about understanding. It is about the big picture we talked about before. It is about not being asleep at the wheel, to be able to see things in a different light. So I am going to be creating a course called Connecting to the Unseen World. And at first I thought that the first module should be understanding the unseen world and why do you want to connect to it. And I realized that's got to be a whole course on its own. Because we need to understand what we're going to connect to, because I can't believe you, and I can't believe that book, and I can't believe that book, because then I'm going to be correct. So you've got to have that relationship. You've got to understand what that unseen world is. Sometimes what I teach, it's as if when you were born, you were identical twins, but your identical twin was separated from you at birth and taken off into a far galaxy, another universe. And later in life, you got this sense that you had this identical twin, and in some miraculous way, you were able to meet up. But of course, that identical twin doesn't speak a language, doesn't operate with the same operating system that we do here on planet Earth. But because it's family, you have this desire to connect, and you figure out what's that relationship going to be like to this extraterrestrial identical twin you have,
which we call the soul, essentially.
Right. And so, I just put it into a story. It's like, how do I want to connect to that part of me that I don't understand, that is multidimensional? And so it's really important to define the relationship, right? I mean,
I love that.
In business, we have a relationship. In family, we
have mission statements. And so you essentially, starting point seems to be, I mean, it makes sense, right? What you call channeling, right? You're acting as a transmitter and antenna. right? That you have. So if you don't know this, you have 5 sensory portals. Everybody knows there are 5 Well, you have extrasensory gateways that the ancient sciences used to talk about, that now modern science is unpacking as intuition, body intelligence, aka instinct. So it seems like, yeah, much like an antenna, the people that program an antenna, the intention is, okay, we're going to go beep, 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 beep. And then the intention for the antenna is the program of what it's going to pick up. So yeah, the channel and the transmission, these extrasensory gifts are only as good as how we use them. And so your starting point is to be very intentional and discerning and to use it in a way that is for guidance. And I could see how, let's say in an occult sense, if I'm a sorcerer and I want power, then I will be tapped into some dark stuff that's not so pleasant, because that's where I'm attuning my antenna, let's say, these extrasensory portals. Question for you. As far as, let's say, some in the audience are more advanced, because I work with some, I'm a healer's healer is what a lot of people have told me. And I've worked with some channelers that weren't channeling what they thought they were channeling. How did you get a sense? And let me ask a 2-pronged question. Did you ever have interferences? Did you ever get like, this doesn't sound like what I was getting before? And how, and if you ever had it, what did it look like? And then it's a converse second prong. How do you know it's, let's say, God, source, this twin, and not, which is kind of like the same question in 2 ways,
Right.
in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. You're just trying to fool me. I get it. Okay.
Well, I don't know. Well, it's two
No,
converse
I
sides of
understand
the
that.
question.
I understand that. Try to fool the old guy, On the hill,
What
I thought
did
you were
you-
my friend. I thought you were my friend.
You dropped the old guy again on the episode.
Well, I'm going to use it. I am going to use it. Yes, I think I agree with you. It's the same question. And my answer that I give goes back to what we talked about before, which is feelings. And so once again, I'm emphasizing, if you haven't opened up your feeling consciousness, your sensory consciousness, you're not going to know the difference. It's like
You're numb to everything. So
my wife is on social media and she reads something and she wants to follow the ad. And I say, how can you follow that? Come on, look at it, right? Okay. So there's that sense of what feels right and what doesn't feel right. One of the interesting tenets that I learned from Sheltazar was that absolute truth only exists in the higher realms. All truth on planet Earth is subjective.
Relative, yeah.
Right, it's relative, exactly. So the answer to that question is, and of course we all go through it, and even to this day, was that really my intuition or was that my ego? And so we never really know it. The harder you try to figure it out, if you go into the communication, if you go into the connection, saying, okay, I got, is this going to be real? You're screwed. You're finished.
Well,
you're
because
done,
you're thinking, you're not letting go of the intellectualization.
right?
Yeah. You're
So
not
what you got to do is you got to get the download. Then you got to sort of mull it over and say, does that feel right? And to this day, depending on my energy vibration, depending on the day, I still sometimes get a little confused. Was that my ego or was that a download? I try not to go down that rabbit hole. It's like, because one of the things I believe is the universe will continue to communicate it to you. So I don't have to figure it out.
You'll get other pings, is what I call it. The holographic reality construct that we call life will start to ping it somewhere else to objectify it. Yeah.
Right. So don't worry about if you don't get it. If you're a bit confused, just be with that confusion and say, okay, this doesn't feel like I should go out and do it right now because it's not clear, right? The screen is not clear to me, right? The voice is garbled. So it is about tuning into your feelings, and you're a clairsentient, I'm a claircognizant. So I'm getting a sense of the knowing, right? And I know when the knowing is sharp, and I know when the knowing is fuzzy. And if the knowing is fuzzy, then it's like, okay, well, I'll just leave it. And I often say to people, ask the universe for confirmation.
Interesting. So you set the intention, you're discerning. Okay. Then when you get the download, you feel it and you kind of unpack it. So this is more of how do you start to get the hang of these extrasensory gifts in a way. And then you don't overanalyze it. And then the other thing I see you talking about is you also start to become realistic that if your mood is low, if the antenna is a little shaky, you're not going to necessarily, you may kind of hold off, and so it's also a self-awareness that you want to make sure that you're also in a high vibratory, clearer state. You're not muddled, emotional, charged, or dealing with a crisis, so to speak. I saw a GIF. It was actually on LinkedIn, and I'd heard this before, and I'm curious if you've heard this, where they say that your voice intuition versus intellect, and how you can tell, and I've seen this in other realms, how you can tell it's God, or let's say actual, versus a interference, or let's say a dark entity, or not organic source. And they never tell you should. It's never a should. It's never a commandment. It's always a invitation. How do you feel about it? And there was a list, because I know when Manya was on the show, she shared this candidly. Her ex-husband is a channeler, and during their divorce, he started to, his advice became more commandments. And that's how she started to feel this doesn't land. Plus the verbiage, the downloads didn't land. So one thing you keep impressing on the audience, which I agree with, you need to feel, you need to attune. Is there anything that you see in the messaging, which is what I'm bringing up, that can tell you it's off? Do you have any experience with that?
It's important to go over what I believe the steps are, and I want to thank you because you helped me add a couple of steps in our conversation, and I appreciate you being my teacher. And we talked about that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
That step one is the preparation to get into the feeling consciousness, to get ready, whatever. The second step that I believe is there is what we call the sensory download. We talked about that. You're getting this sense of either the knowing, a visual, an audio, a feeling, whatever. So that's the sensory download. The universe communicates to us, not in language, but in a sensory way. Mm-hmm. The third step is what I call the translation or transcription. And you could go back to the masters, and you could hear what the great masters were believed to have said. That is their translation. If anyone wishes to listen to the over 120 messages from Shaltazar, those words are my translation and transcription. They did not come to me in that form from Shaltazar, right? And in the beginning, I was naive to think, oh, if the word was this, I can't change it because that's the word they said. It's like, no, that's bullshit. That was my filter. Right?
Well, that's another form of thinking or meta thought in a way, another egoic filtration or intellectualization of the data. Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Of the
Earlier on, you talked about Esther Hicks channeling Abraham. That is Esther's filter. That is Esther's translation of what she believes Abraham is saying. And she's a phenomenal channel. And there is a term called clear channel. You want to be as clear as possible. You want to get as many filters out as you can.
Which I would say is the healing, right? Part of that is the work you described the first hour. Yeah.
Right. But as you talked about Manya's ex-husband, he could be a clear channel, but because he's going through the emotional trauma of a separation or divorce, he's not so clear anymore, right?
He has egoic charges filtering and more likely to pick up stuff that's not accurate. Yeah.
Correct. So that's the sensory download. The next step, the sensory download, the translation or transcription. And now one of the more important is the interpretation. And I go back again to formalized religion. There have been volumes and volumes written on what does that mean, okay? One example I use a lot when I'm teaching is in one of the messages from Shaltazar, they say, be still, be more still, and be still again. And it's like, well, that's awfully redundant. But when I unpack it, and I love your word unpack, they're saying be still. And when they're saying be more still, they're saying there are layers of stillness. Right. Okay.
Well, you can't, the filtration, you have to let the data settle, and it's more settling. So the clarity of the sensory download is actually as close to 100% as possible.
Right. So stillness is not a definitive. Stillness is layers. So
it's relative. Yeah.
So my translation of be more still is what we just talked about. There are layers of it. So that the interpretation, the translation is be still, be more still, right? Be more still. The interpretation is layers of it. Then they say be still again. Well, what the hell does that mean? They're saying practice. They're saying practice stillness because it takes practice to get to the deeper layers of stillness. So I think that's a perfect example of a translation, what I believe they were communicating to me, be still, be more still, be still again. And then I gave the interpretation. There's another line they say, just beyond the nothingness lies great riches. Well, it sounds very poetic, but what does it mean? If you can drop to a level of the dark hole, of the nothingness, then you have a greater chance to connect to your multidimensional self.
That's deep. That's essentially saying that you can mod into the infinite field known as the universal codex. And yeah, I mean, the Taoist would say that's then entering into such a state that you become one, your consciousness becomes one with the field. So you're getting pure codex. I mean, that's akin to enlightenment when you can embody it at that level.
And so that's the interpretation. And now, okay, so now
that's right. That's Haas's interpretation. You're right. Yeah,
which is beautiful, and I agree with it. And we need to talk about our interpretations with each other, and then we choose whether we accept that, or we choose to go look for our own. I accept yours, and I love it.
Or we can bring it together and harmonize and get more of a piece of a puzzle. It doesn't necessarily mean it's this or that. It could be this and that, inclusive in a way where it rounds us out more objectively. So we've got preparation, which don't worry, the steps will be in the description, and we're going to walk you through an exercise in a few minutes once we talk through more of this. So preparation, actually opening to receive the sensory download. You're at translation, and then you were talking about interpretation. And then the last one is integration. So let's tell them about that as well. Lead from interpretation to integration. Yeah.
Okay. So as you said, from be still, be more still, be still again, just beyond the nothingness lies great riches. I want those riches. Okay. So what's the implementation, right? So although you talked about that enlightenment, my perspective on it is we don't have to be fully enlightened all of the time to experience moments of that enlightenment.
Correct.
Okay? So I'm going to go for my interpretation of that is I'm going to figure out ways to put into practice in my life that I can get beyond the nothingness to the great riches. What's that going to be? I don't know. Maybe my crystal bowls, maybe my crystals, maybe a deeper meditation. The implementation it's sort of like taking what you read in the book and then going to implement it. You got to integrate it. You got to embody it. What am I going to do with it? Book knowledge. Sheltazar has led me to believe that there are layers of learning. And one of the lower layers is knowledge or book knowledge.
Theory. Yeah.
Right. The higher level is wisdom, which is experiential. And there is a saying that says wisdom is knowledge experienced or knowledge applied. So when we get these messages from the universe and we've got the sensory download, we've translated them, we've interpreted them. And by the way, interpretation is an art that could take months, years to figure out what the heck, you just said in a moment, about that.
Correct. About that. You could sit, ruminate, and more would come through layers.
And they encourage us to do that.
Yeah.
But then if you leave it at that and go about your life and go back to your CEO job and do whatever you do and are unfulfilled and whatever, then what good was that? Right. So it is the implementation, the integration. A long time ago, I heard the word and I loved it and I claimed it as my own. Embody it. You embody it. You bring it into your body. And so otherwise, it's just like, oh, I read the book. I'll put it back on the shelf. Isn't that nice? Right.
Well, the impact, right? It's what good is this if you're not actually. So let's talk about this, because here we are. We're talking about opening to the unseen world as a business leader and, what it's like to get the proverbial hang of it. So you use this to grow your business. I use this to not only grow my business, to download the curriculum, to learn my way, an intuitive hunch, reached out to a colleague, etc. For those that are in the audience, wherever they're at, let's say maybe they're advanced or beginners, obviously there's practical benefits of doing this as a leader in your life. What do you preach are the benefits of accessing these extrasensory gifts? Because you talked about it a moment ago when you said, if you're a leader, you do it and you don't actually implement it. Let's say like some have dabbled and they haven't actually implemented. Some are completely afraid of it. For me, once I started to see, because I am such a utility oriented person, oh shit, this can make my life better. Oh, I can heal myself with this. Oh, so what what do you espouse are the practical benefits as a leader of actually using your extrasensory gifts and going into the unseen?
Okay, beautiful question. And what is happening in technology these days sort of helps me answer that question. I have had the pleasure of testing out ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, and it's really neat. It's really, really neat. We're creating these oracle cards, and I'm a terrible writer. So I wrote a bit of an introduction, which is really clunky. And if you read it, you wouldn't get halfway through it. I gave it into ChatGPT, and it came out with this beautiful introduction. It's like, whoa, isn't this kind of neat?
Interesting.
So that's artificial intelligence. And it has a limitation because it is artificial. It is machine. Okay. It is man created. No matter how they do it, there are limitations. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. It's intelligence with certain limitations. If so if you try it out and you find it's really neat, what if I told you that you could tap into a universal intelligence that is comprised of everything that ever was, everything that is, and everything that will be? I'd choose that one. I'd choose that one because it has a spin. It has a spin that the artificial intelligence, it has a limitless that the artificial intelligence doesn't have.
Correct.
And I have to tell you, there was a really interesting insight I had when I was talking about this. And by the way, when you start doing it, all of a sudden things drop into your mind. And it's like, where the hell did that come from? And it was kind of interesting.
Well, because you're in flow, you're in tune, and it's going to keep coming. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I'm with you.
That concept of everything that ever was, everything that is, and everything that will be. It's like, okay, that's kind of a little bit hard to believe. What's this everything that will be? I can understand everything that was. We have computers that store historical data. Everything that is, the present moment, that sort of makes sense.
All codecs in all space-time ever, even new stuff that we can't even fathom.
Got it. So what came to me was kind of interesting that everything that ever was is constantly expanding. We have 8 billion people on the planet, right? We used to have 2, 3, 4 billion. Every minute of every day, the everything that ever was is always expanding.
Well, it's a biofeedback, right? Because then all these 8 billion are neural. And then what about these other timelines, these other dimensions, these other unseen worlds? They're all, and which means it's proliferating at a insane, infinite exponential rate.
So the segment of everything that ever was, that consciousness, that part of the consciousness is ever expanding. Everything that is also expanding because 8 billion people, I just want to look at Earth right now. You're right. We could go into these other dimensions, but let's not blow the minds of everybody listening to us too much.
Let's keep it.
I could keep up.
This realm.
So planet Earth, 8 billion people, the present moment is expanding that part of the universal intelligence more than it did 100 or 150 years ago because there were less billions adding to it, right? So we're in agreement that I am anyway, that everything that ever was and everything that is expanding. Everything that will be is not. Why? Because it always was infinite and it always will be infinite. So it can't be expanding. And so here we are in those other two segments of consciousness of the universal intelligence. And that's pretty powerful because that's what ChatGPT is doing. They're taking all of its experiences and making it better. So that's the everything that ever was and everything that is. But think about the potential of what we could tap into because everything that ever will be is infinite and it always has been infinite and it always will be infinite. So wouldn't you choose to tap into that to make your life better?
Well, there's the source of innovation would be greater because I saw a post from a LinkedIn coach who said, what I do is I take popular influencers, I'll take their model and then I'll use their format with my own material. And then it got me thinking, I mean, so much of society is then going to lead to regurgitation and it's going to be a stagnation of if we did that, right? If we relied on artificial sources only. And here we have what you're saying, right? We have this infinite stream that's natural, that's organic, that's infinite, that the access to that can help with innovation, creativity, and the impact of that is huge. And
Right.
yeah, and it's fascinating because here we are grappling with only the artificial one and neglecting this
Right.
huge gateway of information and codex.
So I know that's a long story to your question, but it's like, why wouldn't we want practices to connect to that? Why would we not want to make our life better? Why? I mean, if you think about all of the people that are attracted to this greater wisdom of the internet. I mean, I'm an old guy. The internet wasn't around when I was a kid, right? Right. We had to write letters. We had to type letters on a typewriter, right? And when you made a mistake, right? So if you think about how technology has made our life better in the last 20 years, can you imagine tapping into the infinite intelligence of everything that ever was, everything that is, and everything that will be? So why not start practicing that? I will put a caveat to that. If you are tapping into something that massive, the communication to that is going to not be like it is on the internet or on ChatGPT. It is going to be a treasure hunt. That's why you have to practice, and you have to understand the relationship, because there's no operating manual for that, right? I mean, I got onto ChatGPT. You Google and you say, how do you use it? Okay, right. But we're tapping into this universal intelligence where no one's going to give us the manual of procedure. So you have to figure out how best to use that intelligence.
Well, I call these the human technologies, right? Because I mean, I touched upon them real quick as far as subject matter. I mean, everybody has this. It's in our DNA. Everybody has a clairsense, and many have many. You don't have to be extrasensory or highly sensitive person is the new word, or starseed in the new age movement. Every human being is endowed with these natural gifts. Everybody can tap in. Some different pathways, different potentialities. So I love how you're inviting us into understanding more of the multidimensional nature, learning to find and tap into them, turn them on, actually do the healing work to get attuned and get resensitized. And then what I call wax on, wax off, practicing dutifully. You don't, it's when I first learned this intuition thing and realized the magnitude of the gifts that I have. Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, and it can be really frustrating. And I love how you called it a treasure hunt, because we didn't get a manual for these human technologies, and that's part of my mission and part of what I imbue in the show when I talk about these advanced sciences is the understanding that we have these gifts that we didn't get a manual. I know you didn't get one. I don't think I got one. I don't think anybody incarnated with here's how you use these portals and gates and these inner mechanisms and how you can tap into different energy streams and information streams. Which, like you said, why wouldn't we want to do that? Why are we limiting ourselves?
I just want to dispel a myth, because I know we're talking about leaders and business. The myth that, intuition doesn't apply to business. And it's sort of like, well, it's like, right? I mean, you will hear business people say, I might be able to use it in my personal life or whatever. The universe, the higher power, does not care one iota if you use it to get rich, if you use it to succeed in your business, if you use it to have a more fulfilling life. It is available to all of us and to all aspects of life. So that's really important, because the logical businessman could easily think, that doesn't apply to me, right? I'm sure you've heard that before.
We point them to Steve Jobs, who had the autobiography of a yogi on his Kindle or whatever it was, who admitted later that most of his stuff was intuitive, that the ideas came from a higher power. I think the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, the beard guy, he does Vipassana. Most of these elite people, let's call them the elite, even at Davos, I learned they have a shaman. There's a shaman on site to lead these world leaders, because I think that's where, let's say this, the collective misinformation, and I don't mean the modern day word misinformation. It's like a lot of, let's say, misunderstanding as a collective, as a species that we've done to let's say, call certain things taboo or judge them or filter them, since you use that word. And we miss out on so much. So I love how you brought up what you brought up right now too, because I think a lot of people poo-poo it, and then it's like, well, theoretically, those in power are hiding it from you because they don't want you to get access to the. This is why the church
control and fear. Exactly.
Well, I know that's what Muslims. That's why the Khalif, the Muslims did it. All these Abrahamic power structures were let's keep them down. Because if we keep them down, they won't get what we have, and it's human nature.
Available to all of us. It's
correct. Yeah, correct. So let's walk them through. Shall we do some demonstrating? You want to walk them through this Jeffrey Eisen process to kind of round us out, and then we can wrap up the episode. This initial co-creation. Okay. So let's do you want to go through the steps one more time in a more cogent way? And then, so for the audience's sake, this is the portion where this season and last season I've been bringing forward more experiential, and Jeffrey and I brainstormed a general, hey, why don't you show them how to channel or plug in or activate these gifts?
Well, that first step is set the table, prepare. So we've had a beautiful conversation, even though it is rather esoteric, it's still been activated by our left brain. And we're, even though both of us are intuiting, what's coming out is we're listening to the other guy. What are we going to say? So the first thing is, all right, let's let it go. All right. So step one, setting the table. I'm going to bring in some light language if it's okay with you.
Sure, yeah.
And the idea of that is just for a few minutes to let go of all of your thoughts, to relax, to quiet the mind. When a thought comes up, simply release it and become the observer of your thoughts without judgment. So you just want to set the table to be in a receptive place. You want to increase your connectivity to the Wi-Fi. All right, so Usha unana 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 kia utatatata Usha ika unase paunare iya 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 Usha Empty your mind and open your heart. And as you do so, imagine yourself connecting to a portal of everything that ever was, everything that is, and everything that shall be. And that universal intelligence wants to send you a message. Be open to everything, attached to nothing. Do not censor, do not judge. Simply allow the first thing to pop into your mind in a very sensory way. It could be a color, it could be a sound, it could be a word, it could be an image. Simply open up and receive it without judging it, without being concerned where it's coming from. Just practice receiving the sensory download. And now, while you are in this quiet state, simply put into language what came to you. It doesn't matter how short or how long, whatever it is, just allow it to come forth. Bring it into your mind's eye, bring it into your consciousness. Do not try to figure it out. Accept it for the gift that it is. And when you're ready, come on back, open your eyes. And since you're the only one here, I guess you're the guinea pig.
So I love that, because back in the days, I would have listened to what you were doing and I would have judged it. And now I understand, because A, it opens us up, as Jeffrey suggested, it opens up the right hemisphere. So it allows us to enter into deeper brain activity, altered states of consciousness, things science is catching up to, these ancient teachings.
Right.
So when you started it, I could feel the dropping. I could feel an opening. I actually felt more light come in. And then because I've suspended my mind in this filtration more and more, I actually remembered it, which is happening more and more the last couple of years when people speak these light languages, which is basically an interpretation of these higher dimensional energies in language. So then I saw the light come through, and then I felt a palpable shift. So before I would have been numb to all of this. I would have been like, what the freak is going on? And then now I understand, because of the way I process, I understand my own rhythms and multidimensional nature. I oftentimes don't actually know what I've gotten right away. Before, I used to always say, I didn't get anything. I realize now I actually unpack or integrate over time. So what I did see is I actually saw more, let's say, light symbology images, because as you said to the audience, it comes through different ways. I see it as patterns. Some people get light language, as in visual, sound. You'll hear it. You may actually see, or you may feel it, or a combination thereof. And then I unpack. I realize I unpack over time.
Okay. So what did you get?
There was a symbol. I didn't clearly see it, because again, I was being more with it as opposed to trying to capture it.
Got it. Okay, don't worry about that. What did you think the symbol was telling you? So the translation or transcription is the symbol. We have to be careful, because it's so easy to start to negate it. It wasn't clear. It wasn't this.
Good point.
Okay, so you got right. There's that censoring and that judgment. It's like, oh no, I didn't get much. It wasn't a clear signal.
Good point. Yeah, it's very subtle. Good point.
Okay, we really have to say, okay, that was what I got today, right? It's, it was a full moon yesterday. It's a blue super moon. If we would do this next week or the week after, maybe the symbol would have been stronger, but that's what we got today. So we're going to accept it.
Accept what it is. Yeah, I like that. You're right. So, yeah.
What do you think? Okay, what do you sense?
The feeling was an activation, because I have sensed for about 2 weeks that my third eye is coming more online. And that's the verbiage that I feel was around it. The energy, it was an activation of some sort. So whatever the symbol. The symbol, the way I understand it, my consciousness understands it, is that symbol is energy that then is going to do something to my field or unpack some way.
Right. My sense, my interpretation of the symbol, it was a key. It was a key.
And that matches, yes. So yeah, the synonym for what I said. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So that had a key. Right. Okay. Yeah. So now we're into the interpretation. So they're sending you a key. So if I was you, I would want to meditate, reflect, and understand this key, because they're saying, it sounds to me, I would call it the keys to the kingdom, right? It's like, oh, Haas got the keys to the kingdom, right? Because it opens the third eye. So do you see now, this is the interpretation. So they want you to open your third eye. They want you to go to a stronger, deeper level of intuition. And I'm sensing that they are encouraging you to understand that key, right? Because it was interesting. Oh, here it is, right? It wasn't clear. If the key was really crisp and clear, maybe you would have had the operating instructions. What's next to open to that activation? Right. The fact that the key was a little bit fuzzy, they're asking you to work a little bit more because you're not letting the key come in. You're not letting the distinctness, right? So thank you for this. This is the interpretation. The best way to explain this, I think, is to experience it. So it's that kind of fuzzy, right? Someone could say,
you have to sit with it. You have to sit with it to allow the consciousness to ripen.
They could say, Eisen, you're full of crap. What kind of story did you make up? He just said he saw a symbol, right? You made it a key, right?
Well, the thing is, you didn't say that. And that's where even the way I work is similar to you, is I don't say it. I ask, how did that land? What was your experience? So you do it similarly, because then you don't put your fingerprints in mediation theory. That's what we don't put our fingerprints on the settlement. So yeah, you didn't. And I felt it. And that's how I also discern it's ego or thought, because you touched upon it earlier. It's a feeling, because I'm like, no, bro, I felt it. And this happens with Manya and I, because we're both like you and I, we're on a higher frequency where you can have an intelligible, it's not muggly, you can actually have an intelligible, no, that doesn't land as much. This, and when you said key, no, I got a palpable yes. My instinct said yes. Yeah.
So the interpretation stage, your homework, so to speak, is play around with what are they trying to tell you with this key. Okay, it's there's a bunch of factors in terms of this activation, the key to activate. So you're going to keep playing around with what they mean by the key to activation. And then the last step, the implementation, is when you start figuring it out, it's going to lead you to some action steps to get yourself in that place where the activation occurs. Okay.
So the actually
that will be the implementation.
Transpose that into reality. Take action. I love how you call it action. Yeah. Because what good is it, as you've said several times, what good is it if you get these downloads, if you don't do anything with them, you don't integrate them?
We'll be on next season's show and I'll say, how are you doing with the key? It's like, well, it's still there. It's still there.
Well, I will tell you, because of the nature of where I'm at in my initiations and everything, I understand, and I don't understand it fully, because there's more to, it's more of, oh, this makes sense because my Reiki teacher said I had a seal on my third eye. And so now it's like what you said earlier in your own journey, you can connect more dots in hindsight.
Right. Isn't that beautiful? How just this moment you then talked about and that's what's going to happen when you open up the art of interpretation. It's like, oh yeah, the Reiki teacher told me that. Oh, open it up. It's closed, right? So you want to play with it. You want to journal it. And thank you for being such a great help in this experience.
I love being a guinea pig. That's the point of the show.
Yeah, I was going to use that word, but I didn't want to.
But you already did it originally. Do it. Hey, man, don't be so modest. Get in there. Get dirty.
But that's where we have to keep playing with that interpretation. And you kind of cycle between interpretation, integration. You put some into place, then you go back and reinterpret. Then you go back into embodying and integrating, implementing, and go back to interpretation. So those last two steps, they cycle a bit. They go back and forth.
It's interesting because Janet Richmond, she was on the last season, the first episode. So she was somebody who actually did channeling work for me as a healer. So she channels my higher self. So she basically will channel your higher self if you're unclear. And she actually will say, and I'm sure it's probably true in your own form, I'm curious if this lands for you, that listen to this several times, more will unpack. And I've done that. I mean, these days, the last 10 years, when I go to a teacher or a peer or anybody, I like follow the formula because I practice what I preach, because I tell people, you got to follow this to the letter of the proverbial law. And she says that. And so like for the first session I went in 2018, I listened to that. Now it's been 5 years. I've listened to that at least 4 or 5 times. Each time I've had a different release, another layer. So yeah, I definitely get it. Like this symbol, your human brain, let's say human us will say, oh, I kind of know. Even once I arrive and you're inviting that, sit with it some more, because it's multidimensional, more layers.
Right. And I'll add one final thing, and that's go back into this exercise from the beginning again and ask for clarification.
I love that.
Do the whole thing all over again, only you start with the intention, help me understand the key more.
It's I'm glad you used it. I wouldn't have thought you would have used the AI analogy. Yeah, because the prompt, we use this in law of these search app. And it's only as good as the prompt you give. And I think people are, pardon my French, half-ass. They don't think to dutifully follow up and say, hey, give me more. In fact, Manya taught me this. She said, well, why don't you ask for more clarification from your higher self? I can do that. So if anything, this episode's been, like many of these episodes, are a permission slip. You have choices, as Jeffrey has been saying, and ask. Even he's saying right now in this really advanced practice tip, Haas, you can go back and ask for more clarification. What did this mean? What does that mean? Elaborate and unpack it, so to speak. It's only, what do they say? It's only as good as how much you put in. You reap what you sow.
And the good news is the universal intelligence only has a free program. They do not have an upgraded pay-as-you-go. So as opposed to all of the artificial intelligence that's going to start charging us for the enhanced version.
God must not have been Persian or Jewish, because there's no fee. Because the Persian or the Jew would have been like, what do I charge for subscription here? $9.99.
Oh, you're so cute.
You put
You're
it in
so
a
cute.
bazaar. We would have put it in a bazaar mentality
For
and been
sure.
like, you want access to my snake oil? You pay me.
So it's all free. Let's take advantage of it.
I mean, honestly, we'll wrap up on this point because honestly, that is where I felt your mission because you were walking the walk, because you're doing free events. You're putting yourself out there. Even when you reached out to me and we connected on LinkedIn, you're like, here, I feel guided. This year, I'm offering a free session to people for the initial, that to me echoes louder. I care not what you say, for what you do speaks louder. I think it was Thoreau who said that. And I think that's important for the audience because I have people on this show that we may not all be perfect. We're walking the walk. We're out there doing work that's a way shower. So I really commend how you've unpacked today's topic. I really commend how you've brought it forward in the work that you're doing, Jeffrey. It's really potent time for everybody to hear this stuff because it's free. You have access to these human technologies. They're all around you.
Love it. Thank you so much. What a wonderful time we've spent together.
Yeah.
I've
Any
enjoyed
parting
it.
words? What do you, to wrap up the kind of proverbial mic drop? Any inspired last tips, whatever comes through, and then we'll kind of wrap us up.
Nope.
Okay. Oh,
Well, because
I do have one quick question because you did, without getting too much into it, to wrap up cogently, you did tell me something that I think is important that goes to this whole unraveling and sitting with it more and letting the multidimensional layers kind of unpack. Originally, you call the being that you work with Shaltazar. What was the progression? Because even this may be good to wrap up for the audience. What was the progression of your connection with that being? Because when you told me, I was like, oh, that's fascinating.
Well, yeah, the first thing that came through was Calcitron, and I thought that was their name, and that revealed itself as a place. So alternate universe or whatever, Calcitron.
So you never settled. You kept going. All right, keep going. All right.
Yeah, well,
you
I
didn't
just
attach. You didn't egoically go this.
It just sort of unraveled, like you say. And then Gavish Baninu came through, and it was like, what does that mean? And it became very clear to me that Gavish was the giver or teacher. Baninu was everything that is good or divine wisdom. And it's like, okay, that's not their name. That's what they do. And then Shaltazar came, and then 33 came, and I looked that up. The energy of 33 is what I kept hearing or kept sensing, kept knowing. And I looked that up, and that's the master teacher. And to talk about how it continues to evolve, a year ago, okay, so this is like 15, 17 years after I've been channeling Shaltazar, knowing them as the Gavish Baninu, the energy of 33, I had a Reiki session, and 44 kept coming up. And then I kept seeing 44, and I looked up the energy of 44, and it's the master healer. And I'm realizing that energy is morphing from master teacher to master healer, which is probably what I'm here to do, is no longer just get from the teacher, but now get the healing and bring forth the healing. So as they are the master teacher and they are the master healer, so too am I supposed to transition, not supposed to, but being nudged to transition from a teacher to a healer.
So then the codex, the downloads, the transmission, the stuff that comes through you, then it becomes more healing codex as opposed to informational codex. Right. I had the same guy, Richard Bellars, who had the whole sacred, serious, pithy statement. He's very good on wordplay, this guy. And he said, the information will be in a different formation because it will be transformed. And I heard that from a few other old timer master guru ascended types who said that apparently the masters put codex into the field, that only after 1987, which I heard was the harmonic convergence, that new codex, which is where this great awakening 2012, Terrence McKenna, all the stuff that you may have heard of and the audience may have seen bits and pieces. That's where we're actually at with civilization. We're at a peak of novelty where we can actually retrieve, which you talked about, the infinite that will be. And we can actually start to tap into that more than we ever have. So I sense that's what's happening with your stream and what the being you're bringing through, that you're actually getting a higher rendition of that. That's my interpretation of what you said.
Excellent. And I would be in agreement with that interpretation.
So
has this been fun, or has this been fun?
This has been fun.
Don't answer that question.
Don't
answer that question.
I hope you all have enjoyed Jeffrey and I's episode as much as we have, putting it on and playing and sharing his genius with you. And I hope this leaves you with an invitation, as we've offered several times, to open up to these unseen worlds, obviously with an intention, this notion of priming your intention and going to a place that, who knows, maybe it'll surprise you. Maybe it'll unlock access to stuff that you didn't know, potential innovation, and these things will have practical benefits for your life and leadership. So without further ado, I'm Hasadegi. This has been Jeffrey Eisen, and we hope we've brought you more soul and heart to your leadership. And we'll see you
so
next
much,
time.
Haas. It's been a true honor and pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure. Take care, everybody.